Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to follow up on Dr. Fleming's questions. This deal does not shut down or even limit the production of Iran's ballistic missile program. Iran will continue to maintain a ballistic missile capability that is the largest inventory in the Middle East, as well as developed an ICBM capable of reaching the U.S. So as you know, this type of capability is a very real threat to our national security, and we need all possible tools available to deter and protect ourselves and our allies from the devastation potentially from Iranian ballistic weapons. So given that this deal rolls back the missile embargo on Iran, how will increased ballistic missile cooperation by Russia and China impact Iran's ICBM program? And I'll start with you, Mr. Singh.
Well, Congresswoman, I think this is a big gap in the agreement. And if you remember with the agreed framework, what happened after the agreed framework was suddenly the conversation turned to missiles and the North Korean missile launches, which happened in the second part of the 1990s. And my concern is that that's what will happen here because, as you said, the ban on launches especially goes away with this agreement. It turns from a binding ban to non-binding hortatory language in the new resolution. I think we need to be concerned with Iran's medium-range ballistic missiles, which could put our bases and our forces within range, which are inherently, according to what I've seen reported, nuclear capable. And I think we need to worry about those ICBMs. And if you look at past testimony, open testimony by U.S. intelligence officials, the sort of timelines for ICBMs always specify with critical foreign assistance. That critical foreign assistance becomes a lot easier as sanctions are lifted in 8 years, or if sanctions are lifted before 8 years under certain stipulations here. And so again, my worry is that this is inherently part of a nuclear weapons program. You need a delivery vehicle. My worry is that the deal will actually allow them to perfect this relatively underdeveloped component of their nuclear weapons program.
And one more follow-up, Mr. Singh, before we go to the other witnesses. Can you give me your full personal assessment on the threat to U.S. soil today from the Iranian ICBM at its current stage in development?
I don't know that I have the details to do that. I don't think that we've seen anything to indicate the Iranians have reached that capability yet. They've engaged in space launch activities and so forth. That's out in the open. But I couldn't tell you sort of a timeline as to when will they get there and so forth. I think it depends on a lot of variables. But in a classified setting, I'm sure that's a question that should be posed to U.S. officials.
Thank you, Mr. Eisenstadt.
I'll just add a few points. First of all, as I mentioned before, they already seem to be able to get, despite the restrictions that have been on them in the form of UN resolutions and missile technology control regime constraints, they've still been able to get technology and move forward slowly but surely with their program. So the their access to frozen funds will, I think, enable them to ramp up the smuggling activities. Again, money facilitates kind of, shell companies and the activities of middlemen who are engaged in this kind of smuggling. So I assume they'll be able to ramp that up. Secondly, I will mention that there is no mention of cruise missiles in the deal, and they recently unveiled in the last year a cruise missile they call the Sumar, which is based on the old Soviet KH-55. Air-launched cruise missile. They modified it to make it a land attack cruise missile. If it has the range of the original Soviet system, that's 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers. That's a long-range cruise missile. We don't know how successful they were with the reverse engineering, but I'm very concerned that this was in the Soviet inventory their primary their Air Force's primary nuclear delivery system. And now the Iranians are producing their own version of it, and there's absolutely, the agreement says nothing about that. So that's something I'm very concerned about. In terms of their ability to reach the U.S., they're not here yet. I mean, they've been working on, they have missiles that have 2,000-kilometer range, which means they could range southeastern Europe from their part of the world. If they were to put them on a ship, and people have speculated about this possibility, put it on a civilian transport ship and put it off the coast of the U.S., they could reach us conceivably, or if they were to get a land base in this hemisphere. And then finally, this will just simply complicate our missile defense challenge. We've been selling a lot of missile defenses to our allies in this part of the world, and as they move forward with their capabilities in this area, we're going to have to do more. But there's a lot more we need to do with our allies in terms of interoperability and sharing of information that they're not doing right now to ensure that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Thank you. Dr. Alterman?
In the last 7 seconds, I'll tell you I grew up in Poughkeepsie, and your district is one of my favorite places in the whole world.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you. I yield back.
Ms. McSally.